August 23rd, 1969, Tuscaloosa County, Alabama. The fields stretched out like a brown ocean under the punishing August sun. 15,000 people packed into what had been a cotton farm just 6 months earlier. The kind of crowd that would have been impossible in Alabama just 5 years before. Black faces and white faces mixed together on blankets and folding chairs, sharing water bottles and passing joints, united by music in a way that made local authorities deeply uncomfortable. Sheriff Clayton Murdoch sat in his patrol car at the edge of the festival grounds, engine running, air conditioning fighting against the humidity. At 62, he'd been keeping the peace in Tuscaloosa County for 28 years. He understood order. He understood tradition. He understood the way things were supposed to work. His grandfather had owned slaves before the war. His father had fought for the Confederacy, came home broken and bitter about the way the world had changed. Murdoch had grown up hearing stories about the old days, when everyone knew their place and society functioned according to God's natural order. Those stories had shaped him, molded his understanding of right and wrong, created the lens through which he viewed his duties as a lawman. But lately, those old certainties had been cracking. His own daughter Susan was at Auburn University now, coming home with ideas about equality and civil rights that made family dinners uncomfortable. She'd asked him pointed questions about his job, about whether keeping the peace meant keeping people separate. Questions he'd been avoiding because he wasn't sure he liked the answers. What he didn't understand was why the governor had granted permits for this kind of gathering. Murdoch had been a young deputy in 1955 when Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat. He'd been there for the Freedom Riders in 1961. He'd watched Alabama change, slowly and reluctantly, as federal law forced integration down the throats of communities that weren't ready for it. But this wasn't integration. This was something else entirely. This was 15,000 people pretending that color didn't matter, acting like the natural order of things could be dissolved by electric guitars and marijuana smoke. His radio crackled. "Sheriff, we got complaints coming in from town about the noise, about the mixing." Murdoch keyed the microphone. "I copy that, dispatch." The complaints had been coming in all afternoon. Church leaders, business owners, concerned citizens who believed that allowing this kind of event was an invitation for trouble. The kind of trouble that happened when people forgot their place in the natural order of things. Murdoch had checked the permits himself. Everything was technically legal. The organizers had paid their fees, hired security, arranged for medical services. But legality and appropriateness were two different things. The current act on stage was some local blues band, 3 black men playing for a crowd that was maybe 40% white. In 1955, that would have been enough to clear the field with fire hoses. In 1969, it was just uncomfortable enough to make Sheriff Murdoch's jaw clench. But the headliner was still coming. Jimi Hendrix. The name had been in all the newspapers. The black musician who played for white audiences, who'd gone to Europe and become famous, then come back to America acting like he belonged on the same stages as white performers, who played the national anthem like it was some kind of protest song. Murdoch had seen the footage from Woodstock, the way Hendrix had twisted the Star-Spangled Banner into something that sounded like a battlefield. It wasn't respectful, it wasn't right, and it sure as hell wasn't appropriate for Alabama soil. The blues band finished their set to enthusiastic applause. The stage went dark for a few minutes while roadies switched out equipment. Murdoch could feel the anticipation building in the crowd like static electricity before a thunderstorm. Then the lights came back up, and Jimi Hendrix walked onto the stage. Even from 200 yards away, Murdoch could see why this man made people uncomfortable. The wild afro, the colorful clothes that belonged in a costume shop, not on stage. The way he carried himself with complete confidence, like he belonged anywhere he chose to stand. The crowd erupted, 15,000 voices screaming approval. White college students jumping up and down next to black factory workers. Young women reaching toward the stage regardless of skin color, the kind of scene that would have been unthinkable in Alabama just a few years earlier. Murdoch's radio crackled again. "Sheriff, Mayor Williams wants to know your status." The mayor, of course. Williams had opposed the permit from the beginning, but the city council had overruled him. Too much revenue at stake, too much pressure from the local college. But if something went wrong tonight, Williams would make sure everyone knew he'd tried to prevent it. "Still monitoring the situation," Murdoch replied. On stage, Hendrix was tuning his white Stratocaster. The crowd was singing along to a song that hadn't even started yet. The sound system was loud enough to rattle windows in town 3 miles away. Murdoch had been planning to let it play out, let the freak show run its course and end naturally. But watching 15,000 people celebrate this breakdown of social order, was more than he could stomach. He radioed for backup. 2 units, enough to make a statement without starting a riot. The first song was something called Purple Haze. Murdoch didn't understand the lyrics, but he understood the effect. The crowd was moving like a single organism, black hands and white hands raised in the air together, voices joining in a chorus that celebrated everything Murdoch had spent his career trying to prevent. By the second song, his backup had arrived. Deputies Johnson and Williams, good men who understood tradition, who remembered when things made sense. "What's the plan, Sheriff?" Johnson asked through the radio. Murdoch watched Hendrix move across the stage like he owned it, like he owned the crowd, like he owned Alabama itself. "We're going to remind people what the law is," Murdoch said. The third song was slower, more intimate. Hendrix was talking between verses, saying something about love and understanding and breaking down walls. The kind of rhetoric that sounded good in theory, but ignored the reality of how the world actually worked. Murdoch made his decision. He walked onto the festival grounds with his 2 deputies behind him. The crowd was so focused on the stage that most people didn't notice 3 uniformed men moving through the field. Those who did notice stepped aside respectfully, the way people always did for law enforcement. It took 5 minutes to reach the front of the stage. Murdoch could see the security guards watching him nervously, unsure whether they were supposed to stop a sheriff with legitimate authority. He climbed the stairs at the side of the stage. The sound was overwhelming up close, but he could hear his own footsteps on the wooden platform, could feel his heart beating against his uniform shirt. Hendrix was facing away from him, playing guitar and singing to the crowd. Murdoch walked across the stage until he was standing next to the amplifiers, close enough to be seen by anyone in the front rows. When Hendrix turned and saw him, he stopped playing mid-song. The music died abruptly, leaving only the hum of amplifiers and the confused murmur of 15,000 voices. "Can I help you, officer?" Hendrix asked, his voice carrying through the microphone to every corner of the field. Murdoch stepped closer to the microphone. "James Marshall Hendrix, you're under arrest for violation of Section 12.7 of the Alabama State Code, inciting racial integration at a public gathering." The field went completely silent. 15,000 people holding their breath. Hendrix looked at him calmly, no fear in his eyes. "What exactly am I being charged with?" "Mixed crowds are illegal in this county without special permits," Murdoch lied. The permits were completely valid, but most people in the crowd wouldn't know that. "This gathering violates public safety ordinances." Hendrix nodded slowly, set down his guitar, and raised his hands. "I'm not resisting, Sheriff." That should have been the end of it. Clean arrest. Crowd disappointed but compliant. Order restored. Tradition maintained. Instead, something happened that Sheriff Clayton Murdoch would remember for the rest of his life. A young black woman in the front row stood up. Her name was Denise Williams, a nursing student at Tuskegee University. She'd driven 3 hours to see Hendrix, had saved for 2 months to buy her ticket. Her grandmother had been born into slavery, had told stories about what it meant to stand up for dignity, even when standing up was dangerous. Then the white college student next to her stood up. Tommy Henderson from the University of Alabama, whose father had forbidden him to come tonight. He'd lied about where he was going, told his dad he was studying at the library. But watching Sheriff Murdoch try to arrest a man for playing music had clarified something important about what kind of person he wanted to be. Then the older black man behind them stood up. Reverend James Cooper, who'd marched with Dr. King in Montgomery, who'd been beaten by police more than once for demanding basic human rights. He recognized this moment, understood that sometimes history pivots on the decision to simply refuse to sit down. One by one, like dominoes falling in reverse, 15,000 people rose to their feet. Construction workers standing next to college professors, elderly women standing next to teenage boys, veterans of World War II standing next to kids who'd never known a world without civil rights. All of them connected by the simple understanding that what was happening on stage was wrong, and what they could do about it was stand up, not in protest, not in anger, just standing, silent and united. Then they started walking, not running, not shouting, not threatening, just walking, slowly and deliberately, toward the stage. Black faces and white faces moving together with the kind of purpose that made Murdoch's mouth go dry. Factory workers and college professors, teenagers and grandparents, all moving forward with the same steady determination. "Step back," Murdoch shouted into the microphone. "This is a lawful arrest. Return to your positions." But they kept coming. Hundreds, then thousands of people walking across the field like a human tide. Not aggressive, but absolutely unstoppable. Deputy Johnson's voice crackled through Murdoch's radio. "Sheriff, what are your orders?" Murdoch looked out at the approaching crowd. 15,000 people. 3 deputies. The math was simple and terrifying. "I need all units," he said into his radio. "All available units to the Tuscaloosa County Fairgrounds. Now." But even as he called for backup, Murdoch knew it wouldn't matter. There weren't enough deputies in the county to stop what was happening. Maybe not enough in the state. The crowd had reached the edge of the stage. A young black man climbed up onto the platform, then helped pull up a white woman. Then an older white man pulled up a black teenager. One by one, people began joining them on stage. Not to confront the deputies. Just to stand with Hendrix. To be present for whatever was about to happen. Hendrix himself hadn't moved. Still had his hands raised. Still making no gesture of resistance. But his presence had become something larger than himself, a symbol around which 15,000 people were choosing to unite. "Sheriff," Deputy Williams said quietly, "maybe we should reconsider this arrest." Murdoch looked around the stage. 20 people standing there now. 30. All of them looking at him with the kind of calm determination that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with conviction. "Sheriff Murdoch," Hendrix said quietly, "I want you to know that nobody here wants any trouble. We're just people who came to hear music. People who believe music doesn't have a color." "The law is the law," Murdoch said, but his voice sounded weak even to himself. "Yes, sir, it is," Hendrix replied. "And the law says I have permits for this event. The law says these people have the right to gather peacefully. The law says music can't be segregated." Murdoch felt something crumbling inside his chest. Not his authority. Something deeper than that. The certainty he'd carried for 28 years about how the world was supposed to work. More people were climbing onto the stage. Maybe 50 now. Maybe 60. All of them quiet, respectful, but absolutely unmovable in their solidarity. "What do you want?" Murdoch asked. "To finish the concert," Hendrix said simply. "To play music for people who want to hear it. To prove that we can be in the same place at the same time without the sky falling." Murdoch looked out at the field. Thousands of people still standing, still waiting to see how this moment would resolve itself. Not threatening him, but not backing down either. His radio crackled. "Sheriff, backup is 20 minutes out." 20 minutes. By then, the whole county would know that 3 deputies had been surrounded by 15,000 people. By then, this would be a story that got told in newspapers across the country. By then, Sheriff Clayton Murdoch would be either the man who kept the peace or the man who started a riot. "What guarantees do I have," he asked Hendrix, "that this stays peaceful?" "The same guarantee you've always had," Hendrix replied, "that people are basically good when you treat them with respect." Murdoch was quiet for a long moment. Around him, 60 people waited for his decision. Behind them, 15,000 more waited for his decision. The weight of it was overwhelming. Finally, he keyed his radio. "All units, stand down. Repeat, all units, stand down. Situation is under control." He looked at Hendrix. "Finish your concert, but keep it peaceful." "Yes, sir," Hendrix said. Murdoch walked across the stage, down the stairs, through a crowd that parted respectfully to let him pass. People nodded as he walked by. Some of them thanked him. A few even shook his hand. By the time he reached his patrol car, the music had started again. Hendrix was playing something soft and beautiful, something that seemed designed to calm rather than incite. Murdoch sat in his car with the engine running and the air conditioning on, listening to 15,000 people singing together. Black voices and white voices creating harmony in a way that shouldn't have been possible in Alabama in 1969. But there it was, happening right in front of him. 25 years later, in 1994, Sheriff Clayton Murdoch was interviewed for a documentary about the civil rights era in Alabama. "That night changed me," he admitted to the camera. "I went to that festival thinking I was upholding the law, but I learned that sometimes the law needs to catch up with what's right." "Do you regret trying to arrest Hendrix?" the interviewer asked. Murdoch was quiet for a moment. "I regret the thinking that led me to make that decision. I regret believing that people couldn't be trusted to do the right thing. But I don't regret what happened afterward." "What happened afterward?" "I saw 15,000 people choose love over fear. I saw black folks and white folks stand together for something that mattered. I saw what America could be when we stopped worrying about what America used to be." "Did it change how you did your job?" "Everything after that night was different," Murdoch said. "I stopped seeing my job as keeping people in their place and started seeing it as keeping people safe while they figured out their place for themselves." Today, the field where that concert happened is a county park. There's a small monument near the entrance that reads, "On this site, August 23rd, 1969, 15,000 people proved that music has no color and justice has no fear." Sheriff Murdoch attended the dedication ceremony in 1989, 20 years after the concert. He was older, grayer, but he still remembered the moment when he realized that real authority comes not from enforcing division, but from enabling unity. When asked what lesson he learned that night, he said simply, "Sometimes the best way to keep the peace is to trust people to make it themselves." The story of the night Sheriff Murdoch tried to arrest Jimi Hendrix became legendary in Alabama, not because of what the sheriff did, but because of what 15,000 people did in response. They didn't fight the law, they became the law. And the law, for one night at least, was love.